Hi, welcome to our webinar. We're here to present building sponsorship decks that sell. And we're going to spend the next hour together talking about those principles that make sponsorship decks such a powerful tool in the sponsorship seller's arsenal. My name is Ken Unger. I'm the president of Charge, and I want to welcome everyone here to the webinar. We're very fortunate. We have a number of people on today's webinar from literally all over the world. Guests joining us from Australia, from Tanzania, from the Netherlands, from Canada, and from the US. So no matter where you're from, we know that sponsorship is an international marketing practice that brings together sponsors and properties in making magic happen for marketing. So let's get started. Our method in talking about sponsorship decks is simple. We want you to understand the basics, build your program, and attract your sponsors. The things you'll hear this afternoon are the things that are the real facts about sponsorship, what makes sponsorship work, and what sponsorships really want. We want to help you build your sponsorship offer so that your offer pops to the top of any sponsorship category and gets sponsors to sign with you. And then we want you to leverage what you've learned and build the fuel that will take your sponsorship machine to the next level and create greater impact for you. Now, we want you to settle in this webinar and stick around, but only if you're a sponsorship seller who's trying to build a sponsorship successful program while achieving meaningful sponsorship income. If you're results driven and truly love helping sponsors get the results through your program, and you're not afraid of hard work when it comes to making sponsorships happen. Now, this webinar may not be for you if you think sponsorship is easy or a quick fix to your income needs. It's not. You don't want to help sponsors with their goals. You're more concerned about your goals, or you don't have the time to build a great sponsorship program. But if you're here for the right reasons, let's get started and talk about sponsorship. If you have at any point any questions, please enter them in the questions section of your Zoom dashboard, and we'll do our best at the end of the webinar to get to as many questions as we can before we're concluded with the allotted hour. But before we dive in, I just want to share a little history about me and how we're qualified to deliver this business-changing information about sponsorship decks. After I had careers in both the law and government, I started my marketing career as an auto racing executive. And at the time, I really did think it was my dream job. It included responsibility for sponsorship sales. And at the time, I thought I knew everything about how to sell sponsorship and jumped into the market with my sales team. It was during this time that I made just about every sponsorship mistake conceivable. I didn't understand sponsorship value. I didn't do my research. My brand was not sponsorship ready, and I was an awful storyteller. However, over 9 years, I dug down and learned and learned and learned. I learned my lessons and eventually got the job done closing deals, including one notable deal, a 5-year, $30 million deal in both cash and product. It was these lessons, these hard-earned mistakes, and 26 years in the sponsorship industry that have become what we teach now at Charge called the Sponsorship Success Method. I'll pause now. There will be, this webinar will be available on YouTube after the conclusion of the webinar. So any questions you have about what was said or what's in this deck will be available via our YouTube channel at Charge Sponsorship. Today, I lead a sponsorship consulting company, Charge, that advises Fortune 500 brands, clients large and small, in the art and science of sponsorship. We carry a track record many decades long on both the buy and sell side with many brands that you might recognize. But we knew there was a part of the sponsorship market that was underserved, and that was sponsorship sellers. Sponsorship sellers looking for a way to practically hit the streets, sell sponsorship, and find success using the art of sponsorship. That's where the sponsorship success method was born. So today we're going to take aspects of the sponsorship success method and present to you what is one of our most popular topics in terms of things that people really want to know, and that's building a sponsorship deck that sells. Now, before we dig into those aspects that make for successful sponsorship decks, I wanted to clear up a little confusion. Now, there are three terms that I hear, and many times people think that they are the exact same thing. So let's talk about a little sponsorship jargon. And like any other industry, like any other marketing practice, sponsorship has its jargon and terminology that's all its own. So let's break it down so that you understand which tools are the best for you to use as part of your sponsorship selling journey. So there are sponsorship letters, sponsorship decks, and sponsorship proposals. Again, a lot of times these phrases are used interchangeably, but they are not the same. So let's talk a little about what the three of these are. So one would use a sponsorship letter if you're looking for what is generally a lower dollar sponsorship, something that we consider to be in the $5,000 range or less. It's a simple letter. It's used in the first outreach. And it's really about, I want to briefly introduce my opportunity, and I don't really want to take a lot of effort and energy on your part, the sponsorship prospect. I want to get to the root of it. I want to explain what my opportunity is, and I'd like you to buy or not buy the opportunity. Usually the format is Microsoft Word or a PDF. Sometimes it's even in the body of an email, but it's a simple request for a low dollar sponsorship offer. The sponsorship letter does include pricing. So obviously describes the opportunity, who you are and what you stand for, and then has the sponsorship price embedded in this sponsorship letter. Now, a sponsorship deck is a presentation which introduces the sponsorship opportunity to your prospect. It is sent in the first outreach. So when you're looking to talk to your prospect for the first time, usually a sponsorship deck accompanies it. The purpose of a sponsorship deck, and we're going to talk about the rest of this webinar about what the sponsorship deck is supposed to do, but the primary thing it does for you is it helps you get a meeting or discussion. So it's your way to kick the door open so that you can have a conversation with a sponsorship prospect in the hope of moving your journey along and creating a sponsorship deal down the road. Now, sponsorship decks are usually in Microsoft PowerPoint or something similar because you're going to customize your deck based on the unique aspects of the sponsorship prospects that you're seeking. And we'll talk a little about customization in this webinar. As opposed to a sponsorship letter, however, a sponsorship deck does not include pricing. The purpose of it is to get the meeting and to have a discovery conversation with your prospect in order to find out what their needs are. So at this point, you don't know what your prospect needs, so you're not including price. And we'll talk about this in a little bit later in the webinar. Now, a sponsorship proposal, you are laying out the exact sponsorship offer, including specific benefits. You've already had a discussion. You've already had a meeting. You know what the sponsor prospect wants, and you're laying that out in a document. This is the sponsorship proposal. And really, it's setting up the deal for a sponsorship agreement, which is the last step in the process. But your sponsorship proposal, you already know what the sponsor wants because you've had one or more conversations with them. Again, like the sponsorship deck, it could be in Microsoft PowerPoint, but even I've seen many sponsorship proposals in something as simple as a Word document, laying out the specific aspects of the sponsorship arrangement. Now, again, like the sponsorship letter, but different than the sponsorship deck, there is a price included in the sponsorship proposal. You are setting out the specific assets and benefits of your sponsorship, so you're pricing them accordingly. So the sponsor prospect expects there to be a price in this document. Now, we talked about the process of getting from first conversation or first outreach all the way to the agreement. And we're going to talk about the sponsorship deck, which is something that you will provide to your sponsor prospect very early in the entire journey of the sponsorship as you're trying to sell that sponsorship to a prospect. The sponsorship deck will be arranged in a way that is the same as our sponsorship deck template. Charge has a free sponsorship deck template that's available on our website. And you'll find that the sponsorship deck template has 6 important categories in it. And in this webinar, we're going to examine each of these categories and look at what makes for a powerful sponsorship deck by aligning each of these sections to a prospect. We'll talk about the background section, the About Us section, describing your audience, describing your marketing capability as a property, and setting out what the opportunity could potentially be for your sponsorship prospect. Finally, we'll talk about the activation section, where you'll offer some ideas about activation in the hope that your sponsor prospect can start to visualize what the sponsorship relationship will look like with you. Now, for the purposes of this webinar, we created several fictitious organizations, a fictitious property, and a fictitious potential sponsor. Now, I chose as the property, the seller of a sponsorship, I chose a nonprofit. Why did I choose a nonprofit? I wanted nonprofits to visualize how corporate sponsorship can really be aligned with what they're doing, with what their mission is and what their impact is. You'll see similarities with sports teams and arts festivals and concerts and all the different properties that are seeking sponsorship. But we believe that nonprofit corporate sponsorship has the highest growth potential of any sector in sponsorship over the next 10 years. So with that, it's our desire that as many nonprofits as possible benefit from the fact that they can engage in corporate sponsorship along with their other ways of creating revenue and impact for their organization. So for this webinar, we created a fictitious organization called the Western Nature Preservation Union, or WNPU, as I'll call it in this webinar. This property is an environmental nonprofit based in Portland. Now, the prospect that they're trying to attract into a sponsorship partnership is, again, a fictitious company, but we've called it Camp City Outdoor Gear. And Camp City Outdoor Gear is a national outdoor equipment retailer based in Denver. So these are the two organizations that are having a sponsorship conversation about potentially entering into a partnership together. The property is the seller of the sponsorship, and the prospect is the buyer or the sponsor. This deck that we will go through, that the WNPU sends to Camp City Outdoor Gear, will be available at the end of this webinar. We'll have a QR code so that you can download it. But it's just a sample of many different ways for you to put together your sponsorship deck. But the things that we're about to talk about, the techniques, the tools, are the things that we cover in the sponsorship success method. I wanted to calibrate everyone's expectations and talk about why it's so important that your sponsorship deck enable you to pop to the top of any sponsorship category. Now, I had a colleague who was the sports marketing director of a global beverage brand, and he told me that he would get between 200 and 300 sponsorship decks a week. That's 200 to 300 sponsorship decks a week. He said the only ones that ever made my cut were the ones that stood out in a way highly relevant to my needs. So there's a couple of concepts I really wanted to punch here. One, your deck must stand out. And secondly, it needs to be relevant to your prospect. Now, the art of the sponsorship deck is you're describing yourself and your opportunity, but you have to create something that's relatable to the prospect in order to get that call get into the discovery conversation where you'll be able to move your sponsorship further towards a sale. So the first section we mention is the background section. And in the background section, you're answering the question, why are you sending this deck? Now, again, if you're sending a deck to a brand manager at a company or a sponsorship manager, really, you need to answer within about 8 seconds, literally 8 seconds, why you're sending this deck and why it may be relevant to the receiver of the deck, because they're very busy. I mean, think of how you go through emails. Think about, as you go through your day, how much attention you give to the many, many, many things crossing your desk. So you have not much time to capture attention. So WNPU, in its background, said the following: we cannot make the world a better place alone. It takes people and groups working in partnership to make a difference. That's why we're looking for a few great partners interested in changing and protecting the world for our children. If curious, please read on. Now, in this process, they're setting the bar pretty high. What the reader is about to see is how, by entering into partnership with them, they could be interested in changing and protecting the world for their children. So again, it's describing why this deck is being sent. It's creating relevance. In this case, they're setting the sights really high in terms of what's at stake in terms of the sponsorship, giving the reader a sense that, listen, I need to turn the page and read on, because making the world a better place for my children is something that's not only important to my company, but important to me personally. So let's go through other examples. Sponsorship is very versatile. It can help people in a number of different areas. So if you were a sports team and you were creating a background section, you might create something like this. Our team aims to enhance the fan experience and provide a marketing platform for like-minded organizations. We seek partners who want to convert sports fans into new customers. So why I'm sending this? I'm sending this because I want to help you find you, the reader, want to help you find new customers. So again, it's establishing the reason why this deck is being sent, but it's giving the reader an incentive to turn the page and find out more. If you're a music festival, it might go something like this. Our music festival is not just an event. It's a celebration of the unifying power of music. This vibrant gathering offers an unparalleled opportunity for our partners to engage with a captivated audience at the pinnacle of their joy and excitement. Most brand managers and sponsorship directors of companies know that people buy when they're emotionally vested. This music festival has said, listen, we create people with an emotional investment in our property every day, and we can help translate that into new customers for you. So again, another reason for the reader to turn the page and look at the rest of the sponsorship deck. Now, the next section is the About Us section. And in that, what we often see is it's just about the property. It's about their size, their history, the number of event attendees. They get to the facts and they talk about them and themselves only. That's only partially true. You need to talk about yourself in the About Us section in a way that's relatable to the prospect. Again, you want the prospect to see themselves in this sponsorship partnership with you. So even as you talk about yourself, you need to do it in a relatable way. Just as a standard way to talk about themselves, the WNPU says we are the only nonprofit dedicated to the preservation of public and private lands in the West Coast. However, this About Us section can be used to target certain kinds of prospects. Again, with different kinds of prospects, you're going to calibrate this About Us section to ensure that you are relatable to different prospects. So if WNPU is sending this particular deck to a camping equipment supplier like Camp City Outdoor Gear, they might describe themselves like this: we are dedicated to the preservation of public and private lands to ensure that our community can enjoy the great outdoors for generations. Again, this is an organization that's about the preservation of land, but they have calibrated their About Us section to emphasize that they want their community to be outdoors, enjoying the outdoors where they would need camping gear. If WNPU was sending this to a Fortune 500 company, which had environmental, corporate, social responsibility goals, they might use the About Us section that we read in the previous slide. We are the only nonprofit, underline only, dedicated to the preservation of public and private lands on the West Coast. If that company has environmental CSR goals, this is going to hit the sweet spot of what that company is interested in their About Us section. Now, if for whatever reason the WNPU has determined that an energy drink maker was a prospect that is well aligned with its goals, then they might say, we are dedicated to preserving land so everyone can experience the thrill of the great outdoors firsthand. Energy drink makers are generally interested from a brand perspective in thrilling experiences, that caffeinated high of enjoying an energy drink beverage. So WNPU is describing that they support that energetic use of the outdoors, preserving it for children into the future. Now, the next section is the audience section. So I wanted to go through basically what an audience is. Now, there are many ways to describe an audience, but essentially an audience is who the property, you as the seller, who you speak to, who cares about your property. Who are those persons that you have a relationship with? So if you're a sports team, your audience might be fans. If you're a conference, your audience might be attendees. If you're an association, your audience might be your members. If you're any other organization, it might be participants, like a 5K run. Or if you have a newsletter, your audience may be those newsletter subscribers. Once you know who your audience is, you're going to describe them in 3 different important aspects in this sponsorship deck. First, you're going to talk about the demographics of your audience. Now, the demographics describe those things about your audience that are generally not changing: their age, their gender, their race, their household income, their place of residence. Psychographics, which are so important to an audience description, describe what your audience believes, the values they have, the hobbies and interests they have. It describes them more as persons than the demographic description might be. Again, all these things are giving clues to the sponsorship prospect about whether their customers are in your audience. And finally, you're going to describe the buying habits of your audience. Are they in the market for a new car, for appliances? What brands do they like? What brands do they not like? All those different things about what your audience may buy, again, to give clues to your potential sponsors that there are audience members in your audience that are ready to become their potential customers. There's a reason in the sponsorship success method that people are tired of me hearing or tired of me saying that the 3 most important things in your sponsorship deck are audience, audience, and audience. And the reason that I say that is the prospect must be sure that their customers can be found in your audience. If there is an alignment, if your audience aren't the potential customers of the sponsor prospect, then you're wasting your time and the prospect is potentially wasting its money. and prospects know that. So through this sponsorship deck, it's important that you not only nail your audience description, but you make it as attractive as possible. How do you do that? Well, your audience is going to validate your story, right? If you're a nonprofit that's dedicated to the preservation of public and private land, in your audience description, you want to talk about those people who care about that particular cause. It's important, and we'll talk about this in a moment, to use headlines, titles, and subtitles to punch key storylines, because all of this information in a deck may not pop, may not resonate with the sponsorship prospect. It's your job as the author of the deck to bring your audience description to life. So in the audience description, we recommend what's called the rule of three. I believe, as a matter of sponsorship philosophy, that you can't have too many audience slides in your sponsorship presentation. We recommend the rule of three because we think that that's a minimum to get the job done and adequately describing your audience in a compelling way. So slide number one, we generally recommend that you do the demographic and psychographic details. Those are similar to what you see in this slide. In the previous slide, we're talking about the gender of the audience of WNPU, the age distribution, the profile, the average household income, their education, their marital status, etc. Slide number two is their buying habits. And one might ask, how do you find out what your audience is wanting to do in terms of their buying habits? And the answer is, you are asking them usually in customer surveys and audience surveys, that you'll ask your audience all these different questions to get the best snapshot possible and an accurate snapshot that you could share with your prospect what your audience is all about. But slide number two would generally describe the buying habits of your audience. Slide number three, and it's my favorite, is you're going to highlight a key part of your audience that's relevant to your particular prospect. Now, the image on the right side of this slide, we've taken from our sponsorship success method. The fictitious property that we use in the sponsorship success method is called Pizza Fest USA. And Pizza Fest USA is exactly what it sounds like. It is a pizza festival where people are coming to enjoy pizza and soda and beer, learn how to make pizza, and really enjoy all things that are the food of pizza. Pizza Fest USA is looking to attract a prospect who wants to sell to young families. So Pizza Fest is using headlines or titles of its slide to highlight the fact that, hey, our audience is exactly what you, potential prospect, is looking for. It's all about young families bonding around pizza. And then Pizza Fest is giving those demographic details, including buying habits, that really make for that young family that the potential prospect wants to convert into its customers. Talks about how many of their attendees are young families, that they have high disposable income, that they own a home, and that 35% of them regularly bake pizza at home or want to learn how. Now, another aspect of this sample deck page that I want to bring to your attention is the use of photo imagery. It's not enough that you describe your audience with words. It's really important that the potential sponsor, the prospect, be able to see their customer in your sponsorship deck. So whether you are using stock photos, but preferably real photos of your audience, is super important to create that relevance. And again, the most important thing about the audience is that the sponsor can see its potential customer in your audience. Nothing says that better than a photo or other similar imagery. Now, the next section of the sponsorship deck that's very important is your marketing capability. And this is when we talk about the concept of sponsorship readiness. This is what we're talking about, that you are a platform that can convey the sponsor's story to your audience. It doesn't really matter how good your story is, and it doesn't really matter how good the sponsor's story is if you don't have a platform that can tell that story effectively. If you're not using social media or you have very few followers, if your website isn't good enough to carry that story and doesn't have a meaningful number of unique visitors each month, if you don't have an email newsletter, if you don't have a way to really market to your audience, the sponsor prospect knows that you don't really have a way to market its message to your audience. So in this case, we say that a prospect or excuse me, a property is not sponsorship ready is if they don't have sufficient marketing capability. So in this slide of the deck, you want to describe how you are very capable of marketing to your audience. You might brag about your social media capability, how many unique visitors you have, how many subscribers you have to your email list, whether you have an email list or whether you have a newsletter. Do you do proactive public relations to get the word out in media, not only about yourself, but about your current sponsorship partners? All of this is important to demonstrate that you're more than capable of carrying your message on the sponsor's behalf to your audience in the hope that you're going to help convert your audience into the sponsor's customers. Next, we get to an important aspect of this. We call it the opportunity. Some people call it sponsorship benefits. Some people call it sponsorship assets. Some people call it inventory. Whatever you call it, this is where you're providing the prospect with information about what the partnership looks like, what your offer could be. Now, at this point, remember, you have not had a conversation with your sponsor prospect yet. And so you're providing really the menu, or what I might call it the sampler platter of all the different opportunities, the inventory items that could help a sponsor address its pain in its marketing plan. So you're talking about those things related to the sponsorship, what the name of the sponsorship is. Are you conveying official status? Would they become an official sponsor? Or would they be potentially a title sponsor? Do you have presenting sponsor positions available? All those different things about the sponsorship, including whether you could or might consider offering what's called category exclusivity. Would that particular prospect be the only sponsor in a particular category, say the official soft drink or the official technology solution? Then you're talking in your menu of potential opportunities, whether you're providing access to your intellectual property, to your logo. Are they able to use your name? Will their logo appear in your emails that you send to people? Can they potentially use your logo in third-party merchandise where they're creating premiums and other things that would have your logo as part of the sponsorship offering? You're describing what kind of brand presence you could potentially offer them. Will their logo appear on your website? Will they be included in emails? Will they be included in signage at annual meetings? Again, you're not making a specific offer at this point. You're creating this menu of items that they could possibly purchase as part of the sponsorship offer. For events, whether they might have a speaking role if you have a conference. Do you have display spaces available that might be included in a sponsorship package? Do they have the opportunity to distribute their premiums, their branded premiums at your events? And whether there are tickets available if, for example, you have a gala. And then how you might be using your marketing platform for their benefit. You're going to include their logo potentially on their press releases. Again, you're creating now this menu of opportunities that this prospect might come back to you in conversation and discuss whether that addresses their particular challenge. Now, some people at this point might be saying, but wait, you forgot about the price. Where does the price go in the sponsorship deck? We mentioned previously, and I did not forget, that there is no sponsorship price at this point in the deck. Let's talk for a minute about why that's the case with some practical information. You don't know at this point what the sponsor needs. You don't know what the sponsor wants. Now, in the sponsorship success method, we talk often about how you go through the process in a sponsorship conversation with a prospect to understand what their marketing pain is, what their need is. Some examples of marketing pain might include their product is brand new and they need to create a market and product awareness around that new product. The company might be new to a particular market. So, in the case of WNPU, we mentioned that they're mainly in the Western states, Portland, Washington, California, for example. And so, a company with marketing pain that wants to be known in that area might need a sponsorship to boost the awareness that they are new to the area. They might have other issues. They might be trying to separate themselves from their competition. They might be trying to generate leads. Again, these are things that you don't know prior to having a conversation with a sponsor, but something that all the pieces of inventory, all the things that we talked about in the previous slide, logo inclusion on websites, all those different things are going to help them address their marketing pain. This is the essence of a sponsorship. This is why sponsorship works, because in the partnership, your sponsorship, the relationship with you, helps them. Remember, we talked about at the top of this webinar that it's not enough that you accomplish what you need to accomplish to get paid a sponsorship fee. You need to help your sponsor solve its problem to push their organization further ahead as well. So, how can you price a sponsorship without a single conversation? The answer is you really can't. And your goal is to customize your entire solution to meet the needs of your sponsorship prospect. Pricing will come with the sponsorship proposal. Remember, through this process, your prospect will choose those things on the previous slides. What kind of logo presence they need. Do they need a display space? Some companies need displays, other companies don't. You're going to find this out, but why would you have included a display space in a proposal for a company that isn't part of their marketing mix? Answer is you wouldn't. And so you certainly don't want to be charging them for that. And they certainly don't want to be paying for something that they can't or won't use. I want to make one editorial comment while we're talking about pricing. Often we see tiered pricing in what's called the gold, silver, and bronze package. There are certain circumstances, very narrow circumstances, where that might be appropriate. Usually when your sponsorship is more like advertising than like sponsorship, or you're dealing with so many potential prospects that this is the way that those particular prospects are used to buying. However, nothing says, I don't care what you need, like the proverbial gold, silver, bronze package. You are assuming that the sponsors need certain assets and you're pricing that accordingly. It's like, I like to buy shoes on a website called Zappos, and I have a 9.5 size foot. If I go to Zappos and the only sizes they have are sizes 7, 10, and 13, I'm not going to buy a shoe from that website. Similarly, if you create commodity offers using a gold, silver, or bronze package, you decrease the likelihood that you'll sell to a sponsor because you're decreasing the likelihood you will hit the mark on what they really need. Let's talk a little about activation. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with the term activation, activation, sometimes called leverage, is the process of bringing a sponsorship to life. So you'll see on the right side of this slide is a quote. I can't claim credit for it. I heard it, a colleague make this statement, and I thought it really resonated. A sponsorship without activation is like an electric toy without batteries. And that's because unless the sponsor has really put the sponsorship to work, they not only have the right to use your logo, but they put it on their website, they use it in press releases. They are promoting you and promoting the fact of the partnership. They haven't gotten value from the sponsorship. What our sponsorship success method members come back and tell us is there are times when they're dealing with sponsorship prospects who are less familiar with sponsorship than they are. That is, the sponsorship success method members go in knowing more about sponsorship than the marketers they're trying to sell to. That's okay. But in that circumstance, those marketers may not know how to activate a sponsorship around your property. You're going to help them in the deck, and you're going to help them by helping them visualize life with you. Now, you're going to give them some sample activation ideas. Hopefully, they're ideas that are tailored to their particular circumstance, like what kind of organization they are. So in the case of Camp City Outdoor Gear, WNPU provided them with activation ideas that help them visualize not only would a partnership with WNPU be a good idea, but here are the ways that you can bring the sponsorship to life. And we're going to offer these ideas right at the front with the hope that it'll cause you to have a conversation with us. So some ideas included that City and WNPU would co-author a camper's guide to conservation, detailing how the customers of Camp City can preserve nature while enjoying their favorite outdoor activity. So it's a pro-preservation piece of content that are being created. Again, Camp City is helping preserve the environment, but it's also giving their customers a guide to how to be in the outdoors and be sensitive to the environment. Camp City and WNPU could co-host Camping 101 clinics at WNPU events. Again, not everyone knows how to take advantage of the outdoors. Maybe they're proficient at hiking, but they want to know more about how to do overnight camping. The sponsor and the property can work together on having clinics to help people understand how they can go camping, creating opportunities for Camp City to sell outdoor gear, but also helping people enjoy the outdoors and be more committed to WNPU's mission. And then finally, WNPU is providing an idea of using its Nature Protector logo and creating potential discount cards for Camp City customers, with Camp City making a contribution to WNPU for every time a certain dollar threshold in sales are made. It's giving Camp City the visualization about how a relationship with WNPU would work. Now, a deck will conclude with next steps. You want to set out the next steps in what the expectation is now that your prospect has read your deck, they're very excited about it. What comes next? You certainly want to include your contact information. Usually information about next meetings, like are you available next Tuesday, are in the email cover that this deck is sent with. But you at least want to include your story. You want to talk about the fact that this is what I talked about. This is what I told you. This is why a partnership would be relevant to you. And this is how you can create customers aligning yourself with us in a sponsorship relationship. If you want the copy of the WNPU deck that we talked about as part of this webinar, Feel free to scan this QR code, and it will take you to the page that will enable you to download the WNPU deck. It's a sample. Yours will be different, but it gives you a sense of how we took our sponsorship template and brought it to life with these two organizations that we talked about in this webinar. This webinar highlighted how to build sponsorship decks that sell. There are many aspects of it that we talked about. Understanding your audience. When you get to the proposal, how to price your sponsorship, how to identify prospects. Who are you going to even send this to? The sponsorship success method will address all of these things. It's a very practical, results-driven process that will take people from struggling to selling based on our decades of experience in the sponsorship sales market in helping you immediately jumpstart your sponsorship program. So if you want to learn more about the sponsorship success method, let's book a call. Let's have a one-on-one conversation. Well, we'll determine if you're a good fit for the program. Is the sponsorship success method something that would help you? And from our perspective, would the sponsorship success method be worthy of your time? And finally, understanding whether you'd be comfortable with our team. We spend a lot of time with our sponsorship success method members through group coaching calls every week, through a private online community where our sponsorship coaches are answering questions in our private community, and using the sponsorship templates and guides to help jumpstart your program and find sponsors for you now. If the QR code, if you do not have a phone or other device to scan that QR code, feel free to go to the link at the bottom of this page, and you go directly to my Calendly schedule page where you can find a date and time that works for you. I see, fortunately, we have time for questions. So if anyone has questions, I'd be happy to share them. Sure, I was asked to put the link on the screen again, and I would be happy to do that. Another question we've been asked is, will there be a replay to this? And the answer is yes. So after this webinar, the entirety of it will be posted on our YouTube channel at Charge Sponsorship. We'll send a link to everyone who is registered for this webinar, but it'll be available on YouTube for you to watch any part of it, to go through the deck, to go through a certain portion. Again, our idea is to help you go from struggling to selling. I have a question. We are a nonprofit ambulance organization with a specific geographic service area. How to find sponsors beyond our service area? Janine, great question. And unfortunately, geographic area is super important to a sponsor. If your audience, if the people who follow your social media, who are potentially members of your organization, who are contributors, donors, however you define your audience, if your audience is only in a certain specific area, for sponsors that sell to a certain specific area, that would be a problem. Now, if you're dealing with sponsors who may not be located in that area, but say, for example, they are an e-commerce business or other organization where geographic area of your audience is not as important, those are the sponsors to pursue. But it's really important when you contact your prospect to understand who do they sell to and where do they sell. So Adam has asked, survey of habits seems integral to this process. Any tips or recommendations to begin to collect the data without feeling imposing, such as golf or gala guests? Another great question. Thank you, Adam. The answer to that is simple. You're probably not going to survey people on the spot. No one goes to a gala to answer a consumer survey, especially with a golf event. No one is going to a golf event to do a survey. What you can do is whether you're sending it to that group or to your audience at large, is sending a survey explaining why. You explain the reasons that you are collecting this information, and you pledge to your audience that it isn't to provide your specific data to anyone. You're promising confidentiality, but you're aggregating it to understand your audience. And you describe to your audience why you're using it. You're using it to attract partners to help make their experience better. Sponsors really want to enrich the experience of your audience. That's how they get permission to market to them. So describing all of this upfront in a survey, promising confidentiality, not being imposing upon people at the time, stating the goals and how important they are, encourages people to participate in the survey. So Jessica asked, is the approach similar if you're a for-profit company looking for sponsors to act in a more of a partner role? Great question. Often the lines are sometimes blurred in for-profit sponsor relationships. Because of the importance of corporate social responsibility in the overall sponsorship, or I should say, the overall corporate environment, many sponsors are looking to integrate both cause-related and strictly for-profit aspects of the sponsorship blended within one relationship. If your question is, how can sponsors act more like partners? The answer is, if you as the property are truly acting like a partner, that you care as much about your sponsor's success as your success, and you show that you're working hard to do it, that creates that partnership environment where magic happens because you're both trying to make 2 + 2 = 5. Can you talk about how a nonprofit might use the same techniques for sponsorship via a corporate social responsibility officer versus a marketing contact? It's more a corporate donation than a sponsorship in these terms. Clark has asked this question. Super important question. So let me go a little bit in background about nonprofit corporate sponsorship. I believe the greatest opportunity for nonprofits is to move from the corporate social responsibility officer to the marketing department. Why? In the US, charitable donations from corporations are about a $25 billion market. Marketing expenditures by US corporations are a $250 billion market. So it is 10 times the size of donations. So there's much more resource available if you could demonstrate to the marketing department that this sponsorship is part of a process to attract new customers as opposed to a mere donation. If you were talking to the CSR officer about a corporate sponsorship, then your sponsorship is not really much of a sponsorship at that point because you're talking about your cause, you're talking about your impact. Your CSR officer at a large corporation is really not too concerned about promotion. They're concerned about making an impact on their CSR goal. If you're more interested about this area, I will send you a couple links after this webinar to articles that we've written on the subject about this overall corporate sponsorship process for nonprofits. We have time for one more question. We are a parenting support nonprofit. This is coming from Allison. We are a parenting support nonprofit and thinking of offering workplace training and mentoring groups for employees who are also working parents. Do you have any advice for selling training wellness programs to corporations versus offering a marketing opportunity with us? It is possible to create a sponsorship partnership in this case if you find a sponsor who is aligned with workplace training and mentoring groups for working parents. There are many companies that sell product or services to working parents, and being involved in your nonprofit from a marketing perspective would be ways for them to accomplish two goals. to support this very important process for working parents, but also to move the ball forward on their brand awareness and potentially on their sale of product and services. Well, we have reached the end of our webinar. I want to thank everyone who attended. I want to apologize for coughing a bit too much, but I hope that you learned something. I hope you saw a glimmer of what the sponsorship success method could offer you as a sponsorship seller. And no matter what, we at Charge wish you sponsorship success. Thank you very much.